I truly believe that kids don't hear you as much as they feel you. And so you can
Yes.
say whatever you want to say, but if they don't feel it, then it doesn't matter. Because we know a lot of parents who say all the right things and it doesn't work out. But if they feel your love ultimately, and that's the overriding component, and they feel that from you, and that's hard sometimes when they're acting crazy or bad behavior or whatever it is they're doing, that's when it's hard for us, right? We have this expectation, but the expectations should start with us being loving parents, kind parents, compassionate parents, helping our kids understand that we love them first and foremost, and then everything else flows from a spirit of love.
Welcome to the Unfiltered Minds Podcast, the only culturally diverse podcast where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-seeking behaviors amongst our youth and family members struggling with ADHD or depression. Now, here's your host, Jane Levy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unfiltered Mind Podcast. This is a platform where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-help seeking behaviors amongst our youth and their family members. We are super excited to introduce the founder of Solving at Home Autism Challenges, the driven autism dad, father of 6. 2 of those children are in the autism spectrum. Kyle, welcome. Please feel free to introduce yourself to our speakers.
Thank you, Jane. My name's Kyle Jestel, and I am, like you said, the driven autism dad. You know, there was a time when I was driven to restore happiness in my family. And once we did that, then I became driven to share our message with other families and help them to experience as much happiness and joy as they can as they raise their kids on the spectrum.
That's wonderful. I would like to read the email you sent to me. You said, on October of 2021, my wife of 30 years and the mother of 6 kids died suddenly. For the next 6 months, I documented thoughts, ideas, and stories and combined them into a book titled, Facing My Biggest Fear: 180 Days of Surviving and Thriving After the Death of My Beloved Shirley. If you would like to interview a gentleman who has been through hell and back and still has a top 1% happy family, and I can show others how to also thrive through life-altering tragedy, give me a yell. And I wanted you to bring you on, Kyle, so you can speak to that, because I know our viewers and our listeners can actually learn something from your story, given that you have 6 children and you're a single dad doing it all by yourself.
I am that. I wasn't that forever, and it's a new thing for me, but I am that now. That's right.
Yes. It's a pleasure. And Kyle, prior to your kids being diagnosed with the autism spectrum, you mentioned you and Shelly were overwhelmed by just the stress of home challenges. The kids were having behavioral problems. And you also described that after they were diagnosed, you actually felt relieved. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So I think a lot of parents are surprised by a diagnosis of autism. We weren't. We were relieved, and here's why we were relieved: because when we had our first 2 sons, they were typical boys, and although they were full of energy, and you know how boys are, right? They're just out of control and crazy. She and I had decided that we wanted to work hard to give them discipline and create a world where, you know, we wanted to grow a happy, joyous family. And so we worked hard and read a lot of books and studied a lot of things so that we could be prepared for these 2 boys and could start on the right path. And so as these boys were growing up, we were kind of creating what we really wanted. We had this happy little family of 4, my wife and I and our 2 little boys. And, you know, we were using techniques and tactics and strategies and disciplinary methods that we'd read in a lot of different books. There's thousands of books on raising kids, right? And so we were unafraid to read those books and apply those methods, and those were working for us. And we were just a happy little family. And then my number 3 son came along, and he was entirely different. By the time he was 3 or 4 years old, he wasn't talking, and he was I would call it completely out of control. None of the techniques or strategies we had attempted that we had done with our first 2 sons that had worked so dramatically and so well were working with him. So everything we had tried before was just absolutely not working. No matter what we did, he would just get madder and madder. He would have these outrageous meltdowns where he would, throw things through windows. He just didn't seem to have any limits. And even though we tried to use the same principles and techniques that we did with our first two sons, we realized very quickly that he was dramatically different. Initially, I think my wife and I thought we had just lost all ability to parent. Like overnight, it was gone. And so we were struggling. And about that time, we took him to a preschool, and one of the preschool teachers asked us if we had ever considered having him diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And so,
How
back
old
then,
was he
he was
at
about
that time?
5 or 6 about this time.
5 or 6. Okay.
Yeah, he was pretty young. And back then, he's now 24 years old. He's older now. This is 20 years ago, right? And so all anybody really knew about autism was, a little boy sitting in a wheelchair stimming. That was pretty much what you knew about autism 20 years ago. It wasn't what it is now, where it's really prevalent and everybody knows. And
Yes.
so, we thought autism, that doesn't sound right. He's not in a wheelchair and he's not flapping his arms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the preschool teacher said, no, it's different than you think. And when we took him in to be diagnosed, when we finally got the diagnosis of classic autism, we looked at each other and we felt relieved because we thought now we can get him the therapies and the specialists and the train, from these autism experts that would help us to get our happy family back. So we were kind of relieved and kind of excited. And we spent pretty much every penny we had and years attempting to get our family back in its original form. But as he got older, his behaviors, the meltdowns and the rage and the violence and the biting and kicking and screaming and, smashing of TVs, it all just ramped up and up and up. And we realized that although the therapists and the experts, all those people in that world were doing what they were supposed to do, we had to come up with our own plan in our home because we were still struggling at home with his behaviors and with his meltdowns and with all the things that came at home. And so, and we kind of had a tipping point. I'll be honest with you. We had a moment when he was still pretty young and we had really, we'd spent thousands of dollars and years trying to get our lives back, trying to create some sort of discipline and some sort of regulation for him.
I'm
And
sure.
one morning, it was about 6:30 in the morning. It was a Saturday morning. He woke up at about 6:30 screaming like he was dying. And we didn't know what it was. So we went in and he woke up the whole house and he was having this horrible meltdown, a violent meltdown where he was breaking things and smashing windows. And typically a meltdown for him would last anywhere between 15 and maybe 15 minutes and an hour. This
Okay.
meltdown lasted 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time we would get him a little bit calmed down and think we were helping him, he would ramp back up and start screaming and smashing. And his two older brothers had locked themselves in their room. And my wife and I were just so stressed out, right? We were just overwhelmed with stress. It felt like a hurricane was hitting the house at the same time as an earthquake and during a thunderstorm, right? It was just overwhelming. We didn't know what to do. And so by the time he finally calmed down after 4 hours, I remember my wife and I were so frazzled, right? As you can imagine, if you've got a son who's breaking things and throwing things through glass windows and trying to hurt you physically, and he was only, 8 or 9 at the time, very young, but still capable of pretty damaging things at the time, right? Kicking holes in walls. We looked at each other and we were so stressed out that I think sometimes when bad things happen to us, we look for someone to blame. And so I think my wife and I kind of turned on each other in that moment, right? And she said, you know what, Kyle, if you would have done this, maybe he wouldn't have been so angry. And I said, well, if you would do this, maybe we could have calmed it. And we just and I think we fell into this trap of attacking one another.
And
And
I didn't mean to cut you off. I also saw that I read that also you were blaming the other kids that they
yeah,
were
we
the
were.
cause.
We
Yes.
asked them, did you do this, right? And they were like, no, they were scared. It was just horrible. Yeah, because you're looking for somebody. There's really nobody to blame in certain situations, but we always want to blame somebody because then it takes the onus off of us and we can kind of point fingers. And it's natural. It's natural for
Mm-hmm.
us to do that as human beings. The escalation between my wife and I, the argument got so bad that I thought, you know what? This is not stopping. I need to calm down. And I remember putting my keys in my pocket and walking out on the front porch and thinking, you know what? This is not what I signed up for. This is
You were
not the
gonna walk
life.
away.
I was going to walk
Mhm.
away. I had my keys in
Yes.
my pocket. I was ready to leave. And I said, this is not the life I want. I didn't sign up for
Mhm.
this. I was raging in my mind.
Yep.
And I remember in that moment, a memory of a lesson my father had taught me when I was 12 years old popped into my head. When I was 12 years old, I was playing baseball one time and we were winning the game and there was two out. And if we could make one more out, then the game would be over and we would win. Well, they hit the ball to me and I made an error. And the next
Mhm.
person got a hit and the next person. And we ended up losing the game. And it was all my fault. I felt that way, right?
You
And
felt
so I,
bad.
and so I, at 12 years old, I walked over to my father and I said, I wish they hadn't hit the ball to me because then we could have won. And my dad said something to me I'll never forget. He leaned down on my level and he said, you know what, Kyle? That's not the way we do things in life. You do not
Mhm.
want your success or failure to ever be in the hands of anyone else. He said, if something is worth fighting for or worth doing, you want to be the reason for success or failure. You want every ball, every game hit to you. You want to take every last shot of every game. You want to be the reason. You want to practice and work so hard and learn so much that you take control of your life. He says, never give up on something that matters. And that memory stuck in my head in that moment, right? And I thought, my family really matters. This really matters, but I don't know what to do. We've done everything that, the autism experts and the specialists told us to do. What else is there, right? And so in that moment, I just did something else my dad had taught me. I went over underneath a pecan tree in our front yard and I knelt down and I just started praying to God. And I said, I've done everything. I don't know what else to do. Please help me.
And there you got a message from God that you were not the problem. Your wife was not the problem,
Yeah,
right? You just
the
needed to
message.
work on yourself.
The
Yeah.
message I got from God was your wife is not the problem and your kids are not the problem. You are the problem. And God basically told me, fix you, work on you, lead your family, figure it out. You can do it, right? Don't leave, figure it out. You can do it. And initially I was upset with that because I thought it was everybody else and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, the only person I could control and manage was me. And so looking back, I realized how powerful that was, that I had to take responsibility for the happiness of my family. And that meant I had to become a better man, a better husband, a better father. And so that is where I became the driven autism dad. I was driven to figure it out. Whatever it took, I was never going to leave. I was going to die trying. I was going to figure out how to do it. So that's kind of our origin story, I guess, so to speak.
So at that time, you took responsibility, Carl. You work on yourself. You believe pain does not have to match our love. I also read that about you that Kyle believes that the pain does not have to match our love. Can you expand on that? What you
Yeah,
meant?
so this is something for those of you. My wife passed away about a little bit over 18 months ago, and she was my anchor. She was my rock, right? We had created, not only did we solve those problems at home, but my wife and I got closer as a couple. We became what I like to call a top 1% happy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So, losing my wife was my biggest fear. Years before that, my brother had asked me, hey, what's your biggest fear in life? And I said, losing Shelly, without even thinking about it, right? And so after I lost my wife, I really applied a lot of the principles of managing my mind and controlling my thoughts. I heard a friend of mine one time say that he knew of a man that lost his wife. When his wife passed away, the kids lost both of the parents because the husband could not function properly. And so that scared me, right? I did not want my kids to lose both their parents. So I thought I got to stand tall and be the man that they need me to be. And so I really did a lot of work on controlling my thoughts and making sure I was moving in a positive direction and looking for beauty and love and joy in my life because it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to go down a spiral of pain and suffering. And so what ended up happening to me is in trying to make sure I was positive and motivated and thriving in my life, I started subconsciously feeling guilty about doing so well after the passing of my wife because she was my rock. People would say to me,
Yeah.
you're doing so well. And I'd say, of course I am. That's who I am.
Very
I'm a
positive guy.
positive, thriving guy, right?
Yes.
But subconsciously, I was feeling guilty because I thought my pain should match my love. And I started to realize over a period of time that if my pain matched my love, then I would not be able to function. I could not function as a man, as a father, and my kids would not have a father anymore.
If you worry too much, worry does not really replace anything.
It does
You
not.
cannot be the best version of yourself if you're always worrying about
Correct. And I've
something.
always believed that fear, worry, and doubt cannot exist in the same mind with confidence and faith. And so if I would
Hmm.
get scared or worried, I would put myself in a state of confidence and faith and I would go to work. But subconsciously, I thought my pain should match my love. And so I was
Hmm.
kind of beating myself up a little bit inside because I felt like I'm not doing her justice. I'm not giving the grief the justice it deserves. And so over a period of time, I started to realize that she would not want me to fall apart and become a shell of the man that I was for her. She would
Hmm.
want me to rise and she would want me to be the man I could be for our kids. And so I realized that my pain did not have to match the love I had for her. What, right? We have pain because we love. And so I needed to spend time loving myself and carrying on the journey and the efforts that we had made together. And so it was really a revealing thing for me to finally let go of that like subconscious thought. I was kind of beating myself up for not feeling worse. And I didn't need to feel worse. I needed to stand up tall and make her proud of me for
Yes.
continuing on the journey that we had started together.
I'm so sorry. I know. I read your story, Kyle, and I know I said dad of six to autism. It can be worse. And,
Oh, it
and,
can be
and
a
you're
lot
doing,
worse. It can
yeah,
be a lot.
yeah. You are doing an amazing job, and I wanted to bring you on here because a lot of families are struggling. Depression, anxiety, and a kid comes to a dad and tell them, I'm originally from West Africa. A child will come to a dad and tell them they're depressed. And then you see the blame game goes on, and the dad who said it's because of the mom, the mom who says because of the dad or something they're doing. So I wanted to bring you on because this is real life story, what people go through. It's
Right.
nobody to blame, but we need to hear stories like this to show us that I mean, people like you are overcomers. You're thriving and you're doing the best to be the best version of yourself every day.
I think it's a mistake for us to imagine that our lives are not going to be hard. Too many of us go through life thinking, if I can avoid hard, I'll have a happy life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And none of us
Yes.
get to avoid hard. We all
Mm-hmm.
are faced with hard things, right? And one of the
Yes.
things that my wife and I learned as we raised our kids on the spectrum is that, you know, when things happen, we have a couple of options. We can say, oh man, I hope that doesn't happen again. Or we can say, you know what, that might happen again. Maybe if we prepare ourselves emotionally for this the next time, we can be better prepared and we can handle it better emotionally, you know, physically, spiritually, mentally. And so one of the things that we did is things only happened to us once that surprised us. After that, we weren't surprised anymore and we became ready,
Because you
right? And
guys have
we
a plan.
we
Mm-hmm.
did. We created strategies for almost
Mm-hmm.
every difficult situation. We would sit down and we would say, okay, what is the challenge? What do we want to get from this challenge long term? Right? Because you can get bitter or you can get better. And so we said,
Yes.
we're not going to get bitter. We're going to get better. And if we're going to get better, let's decide how we want to get better from this. Let's be intentional in how we look at our future. And so then we would say, if we're going to get better and we want this to be the result, what
Uh-huh.
kind of steps can we take when this happens again? You know, what tactics can we use that'll make us feel like we have a plan for addressing these issues? A lot of the world sits back and they take abuse and they deflect some of it and they absorb some of it and it traumatizes them and it
Mm-hmm.
damages them. And we said, hey, we're going to take this abuse. We know it's coming, but we're going to map out a plan and we're going to turn it into gloriousness. We're going to make it gold. It's interesting. My wife and I, early on in our marriage, we saw a story about how a grain of sand, when it gets in an oyster, it can damage the oyster and the oyster secretes this pearl around it. And eventually that's how you get this beautiful pearl, right? Is because this irritant is inside this oyster. And it's the same irritant. If we get a grain of sand in our eye,
Mm-hmm.
it could damage our eye and make us blind. And so my
Yes.
wife and I decided, you know what, we're going to make pearls. When we have these irritants or these challenges, we're going to create pearls out of these things. And And so we started doing that, and we got to where we would talk to each other, and she would tell me, boy, we're going to really make a pearl out of this. This is going to be a big pearl, right, when we're
That's
done with this one.
amazing.
And then I remember one time we were going through a really tough challenge with our son. And she said, this is going to be a whole string of pearls right here when we're done with this, right? It was really a beautiful thing to hear her say, because we realized it's in our most tragic and difficult moments that we can have the most growth and find the most beauty. You don't really know the sweet until you tasted the bitter,
Yeah.
right? And so we
Yeah.
decided if we're going to have to taste bitter, we're going to find some real sweetness on the other side. And we became very intentional of that. And so when my wife passed away, I knew we weren't the only ones that had happened to. I knew there were other men that had lost their wives. There were other kids that had lost their mothers. And so I said, I'm going to be intentional about this. I'm going to create a strategy with my kids. We're going to talk about this. We're not going to be afraid of it. We're not going to let it ruin our family. I am not going to let this ruin my family. We worked way too hard
You
to
did the
create
right thing, Paul.
this world. And so we
Yes.
sat down as a family, and we actually mapped out, and I'll share it with you. It's actually over my shoulder right here. It's a little piece of paper. Let me pull
Okay.
that.
That's amazing, Kyle. You're a
And
planner, definitely.
I am a planner, and I'm actually going to share this with you and your group. And this is something my family decided to do. And you can't see it, so I'm going to share it with you when we're done here. But on one side, we call this strategy, we call it good versus evil. Okay. And we believe emotions either move you towards goodness or towards evil. And so when your emotions come into your mind, you have the opportunity to decide to chase those emotions and follow through with them, or you can decide that's not an emotion that'll lead me towards goodness. That may take me towards evil, right? And generally,
Yes.
there are opposite emotions that we can replace those emotions with, right? For instance, on this list here, one of them says worry, and that will lead
Mhm.
us away from beauty and goodness and joy. And the opposite of that is comfort. So we thought if we start to get worried, we need to think what kind of comfort can we put into our minds, and can we focus on the comforting things that we have as a family, right? Because we can worry about our future, or worry about my wife, or right, or worry about what we're going to do. And so we just made a list. There's doubt. Across from doubt, doubt is an emotion that'll lead us towards not good things. Doubt will take away our confidence. Across from doubt is belief, right? And so we decided,
Wow.
we printed this off. All my kids have this.
Mhm.
It's all over my house. It's in the bathroom. It's in my bedroom. It's up here. My kids have these. They're in their cars. The idea behind this is to catch ourselves running down
Wow.
paths that are going to take us away from goodness, and switch and just look at it and say, okay, what's the opposite of that, right?
Mhm.
The opposite, we found out the opposite of frustration is fascination. Instead of being frustrated by this event, how can we be fascinated by this event? That changes the way we view the world and events in our life. And so this strategy here has just been so powerful for our family to manage our minds, because it can become easy. And you probably know this, Jane, when you face a tremendous tragedy, it can
Yes.
be easy to fall into the pit of despair and get sucked in, and then you are running down this deep hole, and it is hard to get out, and it can lead to depression and discouragement, and the more you think about it, the worse it gets, and then there's a cycle, and it can really engulf you. We believe as a family that God wants us to succeed, and God wants us to be happy, and
Yeah.
we believe the devil does not. He wants us to be miserable. He wants us to be bitter. We're going to focus on the emotions that lead us towards goodness and God, and away from, we call it evil. And some of these may not be so evil, but they can get
Right.
you there. They can take you
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. That worry doesn't help. So to me, I always say when you're worried, it does not equal faith. If you
Correct.
have faith as small as a mustard seed, you don't need to worry so much about things.
I agree. I completely agree
Right?
with
Because
that.
you even said in your book that Shirley, your wife, used to worry so much about your kids. You start having plan in place, and then she starts seeing that you saw a big improvement. And the beautiful part of your story is your goal is to assist more families who are overwhelmed by the stress of life, stress of challenges at home, to help them. Now, with that said, walk us through your various programs you currently have in your program to help parents go through those challenges at home.
Yeah. So, what we did with parents that have kids on the autism spectrum is they face some unusual challenges in their home. One of the things that can happen to a parent that has a kid on the spectrum is you don't know if it's autism or bad behavior. So you're not really
Hmm.
sure. And so sometimes you don't want to discipline or punish autism. That's just not fair to the child. And
No.
if you don't know if it's autism or bad behavior, you default to autism. And so what ends up happening is these kids, it may be autism, it may be bad behavior, but it continues and grows in its depth and I'll say scariness, right? If you have a
Hmm.
10-year-old child that's throwing things at you and threatening you with violence, that's one thing. If you have a 17-year-old, 220-pound child that's a fully grown man that's
Hmm.
threatening you with violence, you're in real trouble at that point, right? The strategies that I teach families are all based in a spirit of love. And so when you discipline, even if your child has, whether it's autism or whether it's bad behavior, it really does not matter. If you
Hmm.
go into it in a spirit of love, I believe that kids don't respond to discipline. Kids respond to
Yeah.
discipline in a spirit of love. They will listen. It means something to them when they feel love from you first. A lot of love, a little discipline. If you just try to
Yes.
discipline, they say, forget you. It ain't happening.
Forget you.
Forget you.
That's not happening. Yeah.
And so with these kids, what can happen is they'll do things that are so crazy and outrageous that we get frustrated as parents. And you can't be frustrated in the spirit of love. And so a lot of things I teach families is the first step in every strategy for addressing these, whether it's autism behaviors or bad behaviors, is you got to put yourself in a spirit of love. And then when you go into the encounter, for instance, if my son smashes a window out and I start screaming at him, that's not love. That's not going to do either of us any good. But if he smashes a window out and I go to him and I say, are you okay? What's going on? Tell me what's happening. And I appeal to the love in him and he matches my energy, I can find out what's going on beneath the surface and help him to learn how to manage those emotions. The other thing that happens is you can't teach a child to regulate their emotions when you can't
Hmm.
regulate your emotions,
That's
right?
so true.
So
Hmm.
I had this parent recently. She said to me, well, my son has no regulation. He can't regulate his emotions. I can't teach him. I've tried and tried and tried and tried. I said, no, I want you to stop and listen to yourself. You're getting angry at me just talking about it. I said, you're getting angry right now. I said, what do you do when he does these things? She says, well, I get so angry and frustrated. I said, there you go. You see what's happening. You're modeling behavior. Why would he manage his emotions? You can't even manage yours. The first step is for you to get better, is for you to say, you know what? My communications with my son are going to start in a spirit of love. And that takes a lot of self control. That takes a lot of practice, right? Because your
Hmm.
kids will make you angry. Trying to help our kids teach our kids things that we can't do
Right.
ourselves
Right.
can be very difficult. Yeah. And so, a lot of people scream for autism awareness.
Hmm.
But what can happen to parents is when their kids have meltdowns in public, people start staring. And it's natural. When you see something unusual, you
Hmm.
look, right? We can't be mad at people for looking at unusual things. But a
Yes.
lot of autism parents, what they'll do is they'll get angry and they'll
Hmm.
say, don't you stare at my kid or stop looking at us. And they're setting a bad example for their own kids
Yes.
that they're fighting back when things don't go their way. They're screaming at people, right? And if we model that for our kids, especially kids on the autism spectrum that don't have the line in the sand they won't cross, they will do that when they become adults. So, a big part of what we do is when our kids do have meltdowns in public, we try to manage it in a loving way, in a kind way. And people look and we say, hey, if you'll wait around for a second, I'll share with you what's going on. And then we have an opportunity to share with them, my son has some difficulties. He's got some mental disabilities that he's working through. And sometimes he gets overstimulated. We apologize. We're doing our very best. And people are so kind and so loving and so forgiving when we treat them kindly and say, here's what's going on and talk to them. But it's really hard when you feel judged,
It is.
right? When you think other people are judging you, you get very defensive very quickly. And so we have to teach ourselves we can't do that, right? We just have to focus on our kids, do our very best. And then even those people who are judging us or we feel like they're judging us, we just have to treat them with kindness and love too and say, hey, listen, let me chat with you a little bit. I'll share with you what's going on. And in most cases I've ever seen, when you treat people that way, they are so kind, they're so forgiving, they're so loving. They just don't understand. And it gives us an opportunity to help them understand our struggles sometimes.
That's a wonderful way of educating people on the autism spectrum itself. And you did a wonderful job. So you said Nothing works for you guys. So whatever framework you guys came with, that's what worked for you. So how many weeks is your coaching program? Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a couple different ways to work with this. We have an online program. It'll stream you videos with teaching lessons, and you can just plug into that. And that can be anywhere from 12 weeks to, depending on how long you want to do it. Frankly, you'll laugh at this, but this book right here is
Mm-hmm.
full of strategies, right? And every one of them has been typed out and listed out. And they're everything from, you know, pain and suffering to enjoying work to hop up and hustle to really managing our minds. So every strategy we created for our family, we know other families may be struggling with. So we want to share those with them. So that is one way we work with families is through our online program. Another way is one-on-one coaching. And they can contact me and we can do a 12-week coaching program. The real cool part about this is prior to us even coaching them, we're going to put them through a 5-day, I'll call it a mini training, which is about
Mm-hmm.
45 minutes a day, because we want them to understand the framework of who you need to become, right? If you think you're going to hand your child over to me and I'm going to give you some strategies and you're going to say, it's all fixed, it doesn't work like that, right? What
Yeah.
does work is you accepting the fact that you've got some beliefs you need to overcome. You've got to be willing to work at it. You've got to be willing to rethink how you parent,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is unique, different stuff. And then I'm going to give you a framework that you can start getting results with before you even work with me. I'm going to give you some things that you can try and they work. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, that worked. And that creates this belief in a lot of these parents. And they go, wait a minute, if that worked, what else is going to work? And so I don't even want to start coaching someone until they've already had success with some of the things I teach. And then once that happens, we can start working together either through online programs or one-on-one coaching. I will tell you this. I'm coaching a mom right now who has been in therapy for 4 years. She's been going to therapy for 4 years. After 2 weeks, she told me, I'm really angry. I've been in therapy for 4 years because in 2 weeks, your strategies have helped me solve some problems I've been working on for 4 years in therapy.
Well, therapy itself focus on really emotional aspect of thing, but coaching it focus on completing task, right? Goals.
It's
You have
action
goals.
oriented. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And so by taking action and getting
Action.
results, you start to
Mhm.
create this belief that you're capable and you
Yeah.
can become the greatest parent in the world and you can start to thrive as you raise these difficult kids, right? And so that's really what it's about is it's giving parents the tools, the belief first of all, and then the tools that they can plug into, right? And start using immediately and start seeing results. And this is the beauty of it. One of my rules is I'm going to work with my child in a spirit of love, especially when it's really hard. That's one of the pillars of our program is when things go really crazy and get really hard, you have to be your very most
Hmm.
loving self, right? And I have a strategy for that too. So I teach them how to
Yeah.
do that right up front, and that propels them forward to start seeing their kids start matching their energy, their kids start responding differently, and then we start working on specific tools to manage their specific problems or challenges.
You just mentioned something that is the energy because kids can sense, they can feel, they can hear that energy, that positive energy.
Absolutely. I truly believe that kids don't hear you as much as they feel you. And so you can
Yeah.
say whatever you want to say, but if they don't feel it, then it doesn't matter because we know a lot of parents who say all the right things and it doesn't work out. But if they feel your love ultimately, and that's the overriding component, and they feel that from you, and that's hard sometimes when they're acting crazy or bad behavior or whatever it is they're doing, that's when it's hard
Hmm.
for us, right? We have this expectation, but the expectations should start with us being loving parents, kind parents, compassionate parents, helping our kids understand that we love them first and foremost, and then everything else flows from a spirit of love.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Kyle, you yourself, you are a busy guy. What habits or structures do you currently have in place to manage your own mental health? You're an overcomer, you're a thriver, you're taking care of 6 children. Your wife suddenly passed away. What do you do for yourself mentally just to keep your own mental health going?
Well, I'll share a couple things with you. And so I manage my mind, first of all, and I'm paying a
Hmm.
lot of attention to what happens in there. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people are not able to manage what's in their minds,
Hmm.
right? They don't
Hmm.
control what's in their minds, but it's the only thing we truly have complete control over. right? But
Yes.
they don't. They just don't. Our minds wander. They go down these paths. They go down good and bad paths. Outside stimulus creates our worlds, right? And so I
True.
manage my mind. I'm very conscious of what's in my mind. And so I'm paying close attention. When bad thoughts pop in, I try to expel them and replace them with better thought. But I did have an experience, it's been a while back, where I dreamed about my wife and I was missing her so bad. And this is understandable. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I think I wasn't quite conscious. I was kind of in a half dream state and I started to spiral down this hole of pain and suffering. And all these things went through my mind. Should I have done this better? Could I have done that better? Did I fail my wife? Could I have saved it? Right? These are questions that we answer, and those answers are not good. I was going deep into the depths of despair. And I caught myself and I said, you know what? I realized what's happening. And I got up out of bed. It was about 4:30 in the morning. And I went down and I grabbed my book of strategies and I started reading and I started studying. And I said, I've got to escape where I'm at and I've got to get into the right mindset. Right.
It's
And so
what
I
you put in
feel
your mind.
grateful.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
feel
what
grateful that I have gone through a lot of things that are a basis for what I can start with to really put in my mind good things and help me manage those things. So that's one thing that I will do if I get in a real bad state, which
Mhm.
happens. The other thing I do every morning is I turn on what I call my GPS, right? You know what a GPS is, right? It's a
Yeah,
global positioning system.
correct.
But my GPS stands for gratitude, purpose, and strategy. What I do is I pray in gratitude every morning. I start my day by turning on my GPS, by thanking God for all the things I have in my life that I love and for the
Mhm.
blessings and for the trials and for I just try to start in a space of gratitude. And then I remind myself of my purpose. I have a purpose here. And if you don't know
Yep.
what your purpose is, start thinking about it. Figure out what your purpose is. I know what my purpose is. And so it's easy for me to say, here is my purpose. And then I'd say, what is my strategy to achieve my purpose today? And so what it does is it tends to turn me on and get me excited. Start with gratitude, review your purpose, and then look at what strategy you're going to use to achieve that purpose today. So turning on my GPS every morning is very helpful for me. But more than anything, I think managing what goes in, you're going to have things go in that you can't control. You're going to have thoughts that aren't good. It just happens. The question is, what do you do with those thoughts, right? Managing how you react to those thoughts that go into your mind, replacing them with good ones, finding ways and tools to help you move in the right direction, in a positive direction, and a loving. Because, we can't be good for anybody. If we're beat up or beating ourselves up or in a depressed or discouraged state, not only are we not good for ourselves and not treating ourselves kindly, we can't do anything for the world either. And so it's easy for us to fall into that trap and feel so overwhelmed by the weight of everything.
Yeah.
But then we take away our love of life and our joy, and it damages us. And so I'm very conscious and I catch myself very quickly and I refocus on what I want to do. And that is really what helps me more than anything.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. There is someone, a parent who is watching this, Kyle, who is going through the exact same thing what you and Shelly went through. Just they have not have diagnosis yet and they're struggling just with the challenges with autism. Can you give them a words of encouragement?
Sure. What I would say is, first of all, your child is worth work and it's worth you working in the home. I come across way too many parents that say, this is my new life and it is what it is, and there's no way to solve this. This is just hard and I'm going to have to live with this the rest of my life. I want to just snap that belief in half sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. You can solve these problems. You've got to prepare yourself. It's about you. It's about you learning the tools and the techniques and the strategies to overcoming. My goal when I teach parents is I have three goals. Number one, I want to lower stress in your home right
Yes.
away. Okay. I teach them how to do that. Number two, I want you to feel at the end of every day like you're the greatest parent in the world. And that's a bold statement. But when you treat your kids in a spirit of love and kindness, even when they're not loving and kind to you, you finish the day and you say, I did it. You know what? I'm doing the right things. No matter what you're doing, if you're doing it in a spirit of love and kindness, you are the greatest parent in the world. Even if you don't have the skills yet, you can get those skills. The skill you need to have, what you need to do more than anything. So Number two is I want you to finish every day, and you're going to be tired. You're going to be exhausted at the end of the day. You might as well get used to that. Okay, that means you sleep good. So don't worry about that. Be tired. That to me, being tired at the end of the day is a sign of achievement. That feels good. I know I've put in a good day's work. I want you to feel like the greatest parent in the world. My third goal is I want you to start learning strategies and tactics that are going to make your family learn how to thrive in the chaos of this world. I think too many people say escape the chaos, or if we can avoid difficulty or problems or trouble. And I say, you're not going to do it. What you want to learn how to do is face the storm, right? And calm yourself. When the storm comes, you can jump right into the storm and get tossed among the wind. But when the storm comes, you've got to calm yourself. The storm will pass. Don't be a part of the problem. Be the calming solution in the storm, and people will respond to that. So I'm going to help you lower stress right away. I'm going to make you feel like you're the greatest parent in the world every night. And I'm going to help you to start to create a world where your kids can thrive.
Definitely. Where can they find you, Kyle?
So the easiest place to find me is on Facebook. If they go to Solving at Home Autism Challenges, that is the easiest place to find me. And I also put in the chat for you, Jane, I put a link to a document that if you'll click on that, it's basically the formula we use to overcome evil and good emotions and how to flip those on yourself. So I put that in there, and it has a link to my book too. So anybody that you want to give that to is perfectly fine with me. I just assume the whole world know this. I want people to read the book. I want people to see what we're doing. I want families to be happy. I know how it feels to be on the brink of disaster as a family. I know the pain of that. And I also know what it feels like to have a top 1% happy family who loves each other and wants to be together and enjoys each other. And I know what that feels like, and I want that for every family.
Appreciate that, Kyle. We want to amazingly thank you for your time. I am so happy to bring you on because I know our viewers and our listeners will resonate with what you shared today and just give them some hope, right? We want people to thrive. We don't want people to survive. We want people to be the best version of themselves. So I know this information shared here today is going to be beneficial to a lot of people.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered Minds Podcast. If you love what you're learning on our podcast, we ask that you please join the Unfiltered Minds community by subscribing and sharing our podcast on YouTube, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Our dedicated team of ADHD coaches are committed to making a positive impact on the lives of our listeners. Through our thought-provoking podcast, we offer valuable resources, PBT training for ADHD, and a supportive community that understands the journey of mental health challenges. Also, you can visit our website at theunfilteredminds.com, where you can sign up to be a guest on our podcast, as well as sign up for our 8-week parent behavior training course on ADHD.